If we go back as far back into history as we can possibly go, and if we can imagine, no matter what you believe, okay, because what I'm going to recount to you now is the official, hidden version of mankind that is taught in the mysteries. It's not what I believe. It doesn't have to be. And it doesn't matter whether it's what I believe or what you believe or what anybody else believes. What matters, folks, is that these people are running things. And if they're running things, what they believe will affect us, and we better know what the hell that is. Because that's what's driving them. Drives them. Whatever's driving them that's going to affect us, we have to understand to be able to combat it. A general that goes upon a battlefield without a knowledge of his opposing enemy commander, his abilities, his tactics, his forces, the weapons at his disposal, and the morale of his men, is most probably going to lose that battle. Those of you who have been in responsible positions in the military, you understand that. Here's their version of history. Like I said, it doesn't matter whether you agree with it, believe in it, or not. It's what they believe. It's what's driving things today. And you better understand it. They believe that way back at the dawn of the history of the human race, there was a golden age. How many of you have heard that? The golden age. So many people read about it in their writings and don't understand what it is and don't even ask a question. They just take it for granted. I did that for years. Golden age. Oh, that's nice. Keep reading, thinking that I understood what I was reading. I didn't understand what I was reading until I figured out what they're talking about. The golden age was the age of innocence in man evolution. This is their story, remember, so don't get upset if you believe a different one. Man could not think. It was an animal. It was innocent. Innocent. He went about his business living according to the laws of nature with the other beasts and animals and plants on this earth. What does religion call it? Garden of Eden. Religion says it's the Garden of Eden. God made Adam and Eve, put them in the garden to take care of the garden. They lived in innocence alongside the beasts of the field and the lions and tigers and the plants and the trees. Back during that time, man was, they say, vegetarian. Ate roots and plants and nuts and berries just like many of the animals did. Man lived in harmony with nature. At some point during that time, some man had an original thought. What is that called in religion? Original sin. Man wasn't supposed to think. Okay? This is what they say. Had an original thought. And with that original thought, he picked something up and he used it to kill that animal. Bonk. You're eating the root that I was going to eat. Bonk. And he killed it. And it was dead. He decided to take a bite and see what it tastes like. It tasted good, so he became a meat eater, and a tuber eater, and a berry eater, and a nut eater, and vegetable eater. And somewhere along the line, man had learned to use this club. The man that could use the club was more powerful than other men. Just like today, folks, there are people who seem to catch on quicker than others. Doesn't mean the ones who haven't caught on yet are stupid, or they don't have a brain, or they're worthless. It just means they haven't caught on yet. And so the guy that had the club became the king. I'm the king because if you mess with me, I'll hit you with my club, and you haven't learned how to pick up a piece of wood and hit me with it yet. So I am your master. That worked until other men, watching him, learned how to pick up a piece of wood and said, you ain't the king, I'm the king. Well, we the king. Let's all be king. And then men had to be wary of each other. That was the consequence of that. Men then had to be wary of each other. Then came a day when, lo and behold, fire fell from heaven. A streak of light came out of the sky and struck a tree and caught it on fire. And that tree was burning. Wow. Now, you'll never understand the significance of that until you understand the significance of this. Back in those times, according to the mystery schools, man was pretty much helpless. And man, unlike the animals, didn't have this big coat of wool. May have had some hair, more than we do now. But he didn't have this big woolly coat. He lived mostly in the tropics. If he went too far out of the tropics, he would die because he didn't have the means to protect himself from the cold. Man understood instinctively that the sun provided the conditions for life on earth. How did he know that? Because when the sun rose in the morning, he was damn thankful to see it, wasn't he? It was warm. And it lit up the earth, and he could see. He could see what he was doing. He could see dangerous animals coming from sometimes miles away. And he instinctively knew that the sun was giving of itself for him and for the plants and the other animals on the earth to live. And in giving of itself, it would all of a sudden sink down and disappear and die. Man lamented that passing. He would spend the night huddled in fear, praying that the sun would come back and save him from the darkness. So the sun became the Savior of man as it rose every morning and died every night. Man learned to confront the prince of darkness, and a battle raged between the forces of light and the forces of darkness every 24 hours. That was the beginning of the first religion according to the mysteries. And the first man who learned to predict what happened in the heavens became the first priest. And the priest was the one who sat the first king on the first throne by using what? The gift that Prometheus brought to man. Who said that? I heard the word. What is it? Fire. Prometheus is another word for what? Lucifer. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Lucifer was what? The great angel of light. In the mysteries, they believe that the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is a metaphor for the evolution of mankind. Now remember, this is what they believed. That man was being held prisoner in the bonds, the chains of ignorance in the Garden of Eden by an unjust and vindictive and terrible God. He was set free by Lucifer through his agent Satan with the gift of intellect, which was brought to man with fire. The story of Prometheus bringing the gift of fire from heaven to mankind is a story of Satan enticing Eve and then Adam through Eve to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In other words, they believed that the great fall of man was not a fall at all. but was a tremendous gift from Lucifer, who is their God. What does Lucifer represent? The intellect, knowledge. Some man went to that tree when it was burning after it was struck by that lightning, after Lucifer was flung out of heaven by God. In Greek, he was called Prometheus, gave the gift of fire to man. Fire has ever since been the symbol of learning, knowledge, intellect. Why do you think every great book of learning has inside the front cover a lamp with a flame or a torch? Why do you think after they killed him they put an eternal flame on the grave of John F. Kennedy? It represents the conquering of nature and the universe by the mind, the intellect of man. It represents the apotheosis of humanity, the perfection of the race which they seek. Deep stuff, huh? It is deep stuff, but you have to understand it in order to be able to combat it, or to be able to work it to your will instead of being worked to their will. Whoever picked a burning branch up from that burning tree and learned to keep it alive became the ruler of his universe. Fire could only come from God. God lived in fire. Fire was God. Fire represented the ability to think. Fire represented the intellect. Why do you think every major religion in the world, bar none, up to a certain point in history, kept a fire burning on the altar which was never allowed to go out? It was the representation of the sun. All life, all energy, everything flowed from the sun. Sun was the representation of the power of God in the priesthood. To the common, profane humanity, the sun was God and was worshipped by almost every tribe and nation and people upon the face of this earth. It's important that you understand this because you're going to see this symbology everywhere. How many of you have really been to Dealey Plaza? What did you see there?
At the time we were there, we didn't know the looks of the things that we do now.
You didn't see anything, did you? People go there every day. They don't see anything. How many of you knew that the ancient pyramids were never burial chambers? Never. Okay, some of you are up to date. Most of you aren't, but most of you don't know this. They were not burial chambers. They were temples of initiation in which the candidate was placed in the sarcophagus, suffered a mystical or symbolic death, lay 3 days in the coffin alone, and then was raised by the grip of the lion's paw, given a new name, and sent through the initiation in the passageways of the pyramid. How many of you knew that the sum total of all of the knowledge of the primitive peoples was built into the pyramids to be passed on to the initiates? The mysteries are old. Freemasonry is old. Rosicrucianism is old, ancient. It began when the first man picked up a branch, burning, and learned how to keep it alight. And he learned by hiding the method by which he maintained the fire, and by telling the common man that God dwelt within the fire, and by learning to predict the movements of the heavens, he could control all of the people in the realm that he could communicate to. And he became the first priest. But the priests have always been the power behind the kings. Without the okay of the priest, the king cannot mount the throne. Or could not in those days. Okay? So they learned several things. They learned that by being able to predict the natural events in the heavens, to be able to keep a fire burning on the altar, and to be able to start a fire from nothing and not teach that to anybody else, they could control large numbers of people who in those days thought that that was magical. And then their lives depend upon knowing when to plant the corn and when to harvest, when to till the ground and all of those things. These are the things that the priests learned to teach them. And of course, if they made a wrong guess or a wrong prediction, what was it? We've done something that has displeased God. Therefore, we must make a sacrifice. Right? You're it. For some reason, they were partial to virgins. In South America, it was whoever the captives were. And they would create wars just to get captives so that they could have sacrifices to appease the gods. All throughout the history of the world, these people have been the ones who have collected and hoarded the sum total of the knowledge of humankind. They call themselves the illumined ones, and in those days they were truly illumined, enlightened. They're the only ones who had the knowledge. The rest of the people were deprived. Over long periods of time, some knowledge would either leak out to the people or the people would make discoveries or would have original thoughts of their own and pass it on. So as man became more educated, the machinations of the Illuminati became more complicated and more clever. And the more they had to really hoard and guard the technology and the knowledge and the truth that they held. They called what they knew the esoteric, and what you know, or the profane, the exoteric. In other words, the esoteric is the inward truth, that which is withheld, that which is guarded, not known by what they call the masses. The exoteric is the outward form that they throw to the people. Put it that I wrote in my book is that they speak directly to God while the people bow down to stone statues which can neither hear nor speak. Now, it doesn't mean they're really speaking to God. This is a metaphor, remember. What it means is they're really communicating the truth. This is what they believe. Doesn't matter what we believe in their world. And if they're controlling us, we have to understand what it is that they believe and why. You see, they believe that through the use of the intellect, man himself will conquer nature. And what happens when you conquer nature? You're God. Isn't that true? They believe through the use of science and the intellect of man, man will conquer nature and the universe, and man will be God. Now, does that ring true according to religion? Of course it does. Isn't that the promise of Satan to Eve in the Garden of Eden? God lied to you. He lied to you. He's withholding your true nature. You see, he doesn't want you to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because if you do, ye will surely become as gods, and ye will not surely die. Isn't that what he said? So aren't the mysteries saying the same thing? Only they're reversing the benevolence and malevolence of the two. In traditional religion, you say that the God of the Garden of Eden, who put Adam and Eve there, was a benevolent, good God, and they were living the good life. And if they hadn't have sinned, they'd still be there, living and taking care of the animals in the garden and be living a blissful, wonderful existence. And they're saying, hey, that guy that put them there and kept them in the bonds of ignorance wasn't doing them a favor. They were really slaves in this ignorant state, this innocent life, this golden age. Lucifer set man free, gave him the gift of intellect, the use of which will make him God. Now, it would amaze you to know how many people really believe in this. It would absolutely amaze you to know that some of the major religions in the world, disguised as Christian religions, actually worship Lucifer in secret. You would be amazed to know how many people believe that Jesus Christ and Lucifer were brothers. And that there was a battle between who was going to save mankind from itself. Jesus won that battle. He had his chance. He failed. Now it's Lucifer's turn. You might also be shocked to know that Tom Valentine believes that. And he said it in an interview with Richard Noon, and it's recorded in his book, 5/5/2000. What's the name of that book? ICE, The Ultimate Disaster, 5/5/2000. Get it and read it. It would amaze you to know how many supposed patriot leaders that you all look up to believe this. That are really not patriot leaders at all, but are functioning in the Hegelian dialectic to move you in the wrong direction, or to pit you against each other, or to just find out who in the hell you are. There's one that's traveled all over the whole country. And wherever he is the religion of whoever he's talking to. It's true. And some of you know that. When he's talking to Christians, he's a Christian. When he's talking to Christian identity, he's a Christian identity. If he's talking to Nazis, he's a Nazi. Talking about Bobo? If he's talking to Mormons, he's a Mormon. If he's talking to people who hate Mormons, he's left the Mormon church. If he's talking to the New Agers in Sedona, Arizona, he's tried every religion in the world. He's never found one that he could believe in. That's Bo Grites. You don't believe me? Go get all his tapes talking to all these different groups and listen to his own words. Now, I don't care what religion the man is. I believe in freedom. You know what I care about? He's lying to a lot of people. That matters to me. Some people tell me, well, that doesn't matter. He's doing good. I mean, maybe he has some failings. Every time he speaks to a different group, and every time he gets caught, he says he's never going to do it again, but he does. And just recently on his radio show, this man was talking about how he put his son through past life regression and how he believed in reincarnation. The only reason I'm telling you this is so that you will be aware that you're being manipulated by a lot of different people and that you can't allow it to happen. You cannot believe anyone anymore. This is the age of deception. If you don't learn anything else today, I hope you learn that. This is the age of deception. Who's the great deceiver? So you better be careful if you're a Christian. If you're not a Christian, I hope you at least believe in God. And if you don't, you're lost. We're all lost. Without God, there can be no freedom. There can be no creator-endowed rights. There can be no protection of those rights. And we are all lost. I don't know about you. I don't want to be lost. It's a terrible state to be in. Coming up through history, these people have always been the ones who have guarded technology, who have guarded knowledge. Why do you think it was that nobody was allowed to read a book in Europe for thousands of years? Do you really think that would have hurt them if the common man could read books? Not just religion, but everything. They couldn't control man with the hidden knowledge anymore. What upset the balance of power in the world more than anything? The printing press. Why do you think President Bill Clinton calls me the most dangerous radio host in America and is sick the IRS, the BATF, and the FBI on me? Because I didn't believe them when they told me that I was just one lonely little person and there wasn't anything that I could do. I've never believed it. Many of you are sitting here thinking that right now. I'm just one lonely little person and nothing that I can do. This is all terrible news, but what can I do? And you'll go home and you won't do anything because you convince yourself that you can't. Well, you see, I just never believed that. I just couldn't believe that because you know why? Because I'm a Christian. Now, I'm not trying to insult you or say that if you're not a Christian, that's bad or anything like that. But that enabled me to come out of it because I looked back at what Jesus Christ, one lonely, helpless, solitary human being, did and enabled me to do whatever I want to do. See, he lit the way for me.